Hello, everybody. Welcome to January 2025. Holy moly, we made it and we're here and welcome. So nice to see you here. Thanks for following, watching, all the things. There's some good stuff in front of us in January, some tough stuff, some good stuff. It's a good mixed bag. So let's jump in. 2024 certainly opened up the door for the new chapter that 2025 is ushering in, which is a whole kind of another chapter and information that I'll be getting into in a little bit. But 2024 was rife with destabilizing events, as we know, and a sense of revolution, a sense of really shifting things to make room for big change. Technology is clearly on the brink of altering our day-to-day life as we know it, including AI, drones, and autonomous transportation. UFO sightings and government acknowledgement of alien presence on Earth has been brought to the forefront, and we've really seen that, in all of this development as Pluto has kind of made its ingress each time over the past year or so, and finally ingressed in November of 2024. Plus so much more than we can fathom at the present moment. So we're kind of on the brink of all of this technology and all of these new ideas coming to the surface and becoming part of eventually becoming ingrained and woven into our day-to-day lives. So while January doesn't plunge us head first into the changes that await us in 2025, it does set the stage to open us up to our potential, both individually and universally. It begs us to more seriously contemplate and dare to state to the universe, what do I want? I'm not speaking to New Year's resolutions, checking boxes, and attaining a thing. I'm speaking to sinking into your soul's purpose and stating the desires that you discover there, and allowing for the exploration and possibly the development so that part of you can organically come forward. So this doesn't include to-do lists. There's no destination. It's simply our soul's desire. Don't underestimate the power of the word and how simple a statement can positively transform your life. Tune into my conversation with Sarah on Broadcast Astrology around mid-January when we will cover the astrology for 2025. But first, let's take one step at a time and focus on January 2025. So first off, in January, we have Mars retrograde opposite Pluto. And Mars retrograde is a huge theme in this whole January timeframe. January begins with another burst of intensity, power struggle, and possibly additional adjustments in leadership. We had the first opposition between Mars and Pluto on November 3rd, 2024, so the day before Election Day. And so that was really embedded in the energetics of Election Day. And since Mars stationed retrograde on Leo on December 6, 2024, it has been in a slow and creeping mutually applying opposition with Pluto. So we've been feeling this, even though it hasn't been exact, it's definitely been playing out, not just in the United States, but also in the world stage. Over the past couple of months, we have seen a series of leadership positions being toppled or largely challenged. We have seen this both with the French and German prime ministers as they've lost their confidence votes and have been had to stand down. In addition, the Assad regime of Syria was overthrown by a successful rebellion. And we could see these stories continue to develop and possibly more added to the list. It'll be interesting to see how that actually plays out as this conjunction grows closer and is exact again on November 3rd. We have another one of these oppositions coming into perfection later in the year, in the spring. I believe it's in April, as Mars stations direct and comes back and re-enters Leo and opposes Pluto again. The impending change in the U.S. government after the U.S. presidential election is illustrating a different manifestation of the Mars-Pluto opposition. In some ways, a lot of this is kind of a really heavy power structure, a top-heavy power structure in some ways that we've seen just be presented or enter into the American uh, political stage in a very non-obstructed way and possibly causing a lot of friction. So the cabinet that Trump is assembling is creating power struggles within the government. There's been a fair amount of pressure put on several of the candidates for the position, as well as abnormal amounts of pressure put on those who do not support the proposed candidates. The storyline will also continue after Trump is sworn in on January 20th, 2025. For you personally, look for uneven power plays in your life. Mars is still retrograde. So the fight in us is a bit squirrely. Anger and frustration could manifest out of the blue. If you have been pushing down anger and dampened down actions required to move forward in your life, then you could be confronted with the need to follow through. Also, look at why you are avoiding your anger, as well as why you're avoiding these actions that you haven't been following through on. And why are you not taking the steps to fulfill these accomplishments? So this is a really great time with Mars retrograde, especially with this opposition to Pluto, to do a lot of this inner processing. The inner work is really pronounced as far as our goals, our ambitions, our drives go. As I encouraged you to do last month, allow your anger and frustrations to flow. This is going to be something that's important in ebbing and flowing times in the next couple of months as well, as Mars continues to be retrograde. It stations direct in February, so next month, but we're still going to be heading back towards this opposition again in about April. So maybe even take out a piece of paper. And maybe this is a cheesy recommendation, but it made sense to me at the time and still does. But take out a piece of paper and write down all that makes you angry without editing. Let the anger flow onto the paper without any shame, without any self-evaluation. Anger is an important tool and one that we tend to tamper down because it's not very pleasant. And with this Pluto really exposing this Mars energy, maybe some of the trauma of our anger is being illustrated as well. So once you've completed your list, unedited, unobstructed, no interference, nobody is going to see this. This is for you. Review it and fill the paper with hearts. I know that sounds cheesy or whatever makes the connection for you. The point of this is to bring the anger closer to you, because when anger is separate, it gains strength and can end up being more destructive when it slams through the door. So I'm not saying bring in the anger and just let it explode willy-nilly. What I'm saying is find compassion or find some understanding with that anger and recognize that it's not something separate from you necessarily, that it's a tool for you to grow and to be more within your power and your strength and to figure out your direction in life is really what I'm saying here. And if it feels like in alignment, maybe burn that piece of paper, whatever feels good to you. So that is that part of the month. And the beginning's really going to be have the most crunchiness to it. So our next stop is the nodes moving onto the Pisces Virgo axis. The north node is moving into Pisces. The south node will be in Virgo. And these are the lunar nodes, and they largely determine the signs that the eclipses will be taking place in. So we're having a shift in our eclipse focus on January 11th. Eclipses, the sun and the moon have to form either a new moon or a full moon within 18 degrees of this nodal axis in order for an eclipse to take place. The nodes have been on the Aries Libra axis since July 17th, 2023. And on January 11th, 2025, they move into this new axis. On the world stage, eclipses on the Aries Libra axis has ushered in and subsequently increased the conflict between Israel and various groups of countries. So each time we've had an eclipse on this Aries Libra axis, we saw both the beginning and escalation of the conflicts with Israel and surrounding groups and countries. So It'll be interesting to see in late March when we have our final eclipse in Aries, what this is going to look like. And that will be a solar eclipse, a hybrid solar eclipse in Aries, the end of March 2025. So in general, the Aries Libra eclipses promise to impact our relationships in various ways because this axis is the relational axis. Many of us have been working through how to maintain our autonomy while also navigating intimacy, which is a very tricky balance for many of us, and walking this relationship tightrope in many ways. So a lot of us, depending on where these eclipses have taken place in your chart, relationships definitely could have been part of what you're navigating. As we move into the Pisces Virgo axis, we could be turning our focus on trusting the spiritual exploration, Pisces, and tampering down the perfection of spiritual tasks, which is Virgo. We may find ourselves broadening our relationship to service and finding more compassion towards the struggles of others. A more intuitive and holistic approach to health and wellness could be highlighted. And more negatively, we could find that martyrs are being raised up in an irrational way, and our ideals could get the best of us. Personally, the manifestation of the nodes moving into the Pisces Virgo axis will be strongly determined by where they fall in your natal chart, which is what I stated before, the houses and planets that they impact. And if you're interested to see how this new shift will be impacting you, book a consultation. I'm here. So, Cancer full moon. On January 13th, there's a beautiful new full moon in Cancer. This full moon highlights the positive and flowing aspects that are taking place at this time. These include moon sextile Uranus and Neptune. And in addition, this is the full moon moment for the Mars retrograde, which is when the sun is opposite the retrograde Mars. This opposition perfects a couple days after, but it's definitely in play as this full moon is happening. This signals the midpoint of the Mars retrograde cycle. Hence, Mars retrograde is also conjunct the moon. At this point, you could be receiving insights surrounding the productivity within this Mars retrograde for you personally, especially if you have personal planets or points around 23 degrees of any zodiacal sign. Have you been mulling over a new game plan for your life? Is there a project that you feel is finally time to bring to fruition as discussed above? While you may not be putting the pieces into place at this moment, you could gain more clarity surrounding the importance of bringing this idea into manifestation and the initial steps to do so. So you could, earlier in the month, be finding the crunchiness with the Mars opposite Pluto. And then as this full moon arrives, be coming to some resolution, having something illuminated for you and how to move forward. For the U.S., this ushers in a moment when the 2025 U.S. presidential inauguration will take place on January 20th. With a quick glance at this predictive chart, which is something that I always really like to do, there's a suggestion towards notable protests at this time. And also, this was pointed to in the Capricorn ingress chart, which Sarah and I looked at just a couple weeks ago for when the sun ingressed into Capricorn, which looks at the next 4 months ahead of time. So corroboration there. So definitely the potential for protests or just a stirring of rebellion, unrest in some way. And this most likely could center on women who are feeling angered or restricted, which probably doesn't come to many people's, isn't surprising. Sun conjunct Pluto is our next stop. So while the sun conjoins Pluto every year and isn't normally, it's an event, but not like a huge event. This one is important because it takes place in the early morning of January 21st, just after the inauguration, which means that the aspect is strong and applying as the inauguration takes place on January 20th. The combination of Sun-Pluto indicates powerful leadership, a man with immense sway, and the ability to rule with a heavy fist, as well as charisma. Sun-Pluto can also suggest leadership that is top-heavy and vicious in maintaining full control no matter what, as well as controlling measures out of fear. So we know that Mars was just interacting with this Pluto as well and isn't that far out of range. So we still have this top-heavy power being activated at this time and is part of the inauguration, which in many ways could be like the birth chart or the predictive chart for this next president, next 4 years of this president's seat. So very noteworthy and kind of in some ways foreshadowing on what we can expect in the coming years with this new presidential administration. So the Aquarius new moon is next, and it takes place on January 29th, 2025, and is situated at 9 degrees Aquarius, 15 minutes. All in all, the Aquarius new moon is mostly supportive and inspiring, featuring a trine to Jupiter and a semi-square to Venus. So the inward motion that the new moons can inspire is likely to be fertile and even a bit sensual and exciting. With an emphasis on the air element, we could experience an increase of personal interactions, knowledge, and the transfer of information in general. Our inner process is being externalized and shared with others. If you're a writer or any kind of creator, get your pen and paper or other creative tools out. This could be a very productive time. The sun is in a parallel relationship to Uranus as well, reiterating the overall inspired and activated nature of this new moon. And the moon is in a parallel relationship to Mercury and Jupiter, further stating that there is an abundance of connection and the circulation of ideas. Something is brewing that will eventually release an electric charge and result in inspiration and possibly revolution. You don't want to let the magic of this new moon pass you by. Next up, Uranus stations direct. This happens on January 30th, 2025 at 23 degrees Taurus, 15 minutes. So we have another big occurrence at 23 degrees. The Cancer full moon took place at 23 degrees as well. So if you have anything at 23 degrees or a couple degrees around that, any sign, this month could be pretty activating for you. Take a look. The themes of excitement and connection and even revolution that are front and center for the Aquarius new moon, which is taking place the day before. This is definitely going to be happening as the new moon occurs on the 29th. You're going to feel this. Like I said, this Uranus is parallel to the sun, which is integral to the new moon. A lot of energizing excitement happening. I have found that Uranus stations can be the most easily felt of the outer planet or any planet stationing because of their physical manifestations. Uranus stations can result in heightened restlessness, out of the blue excitement, greater overall activity and chaos, and in its worst, anxiety. Regardless, you can almost physically feel the electricity in the air revving everything up. It's as though there was a double shot of espresso added to the water supply, which can be fun until it's not. So, outer planet stations are typically felt about 5 days prior and 5 days after. So, expect to feel Uranus' station around January 25th and until about January 4th, 2025. But more so on the front end. Uranus usually likes to jump in on the early end, and then towards the end of whatever it's activating tends to be a little bit more of the burnout phase of it. But, that's just what I found. And you could find a different outcome for sure. So allow some extra space in your schedule for things to go a bit haywire or to fit in some unexpected adventures. And as I said before, because the sun is in a parallel relationship to Uranus at this time, we could experience some distinct disturbance within the US leadership, as well as just leadership worldwide, and some more surprising occurrences or events taking place around those who are in leadership roles around the world. This could illustrate the inevitable waves and even tsunamis that the Trump administration will likely be kicking up as they settle into Washington, D.C. So closing. We've reached the end of January. Although January begins on a bit of a challenging note with the Mars opposition to Pluto and the continuation of Mars retrograde, which doesn't station direct until February 23rd, there is a lot to be excited for this month. Overall, the full and the new moon are very nice. There's a promise for new ideas and excitement around what is to come. Even if you're not in alignment with much of what is going on in the leadership of our nation and or the world, this is a great time to figure out what you want. Write it down. Meet up with like-minded individuals and brainstorm. Create content and share it. 2025 will be a time of immense change, although we may not see the manifestations for some time. And it's going to happen regardless of how we feel about it. But that doesn't mean that each of us cannot create our own communities, create our own movements of change, and jump into the cosmic riptide of evolution. The astrology of January states that there is a heavy-handed leadership, but it is also challenging each of us to be strong and sovereign in our own beliefs and do something with those beliefs. 2025 is not a year to be a wallflower and stick your head in the sand. Inspiration and vision is available to each and every one of us. Find out what is alive within you and let that light grow. Signing off, everyone. Thanks again for joining me for this monthly overview. Like, share, subscribe. I'm here for consultations. I'd love to see each and every one of you go over and figure out what's in store for you for this next year. Lots of love. As always, love and gratitude. Take care. Bye.